you're not going to want to miss these beautiful women that are going to share their talks. So I'm going to introduce my very next speaker, and the first one of today, also a Woman Gone Wild author, Bella. What's happening, my dear? So wonderful to see you, lovely. So happy to see you. I'm going to introduce you in just a minute, Bella. We're going to have you make sure that you get unmuted, but I want to make sure we give Bella the best introduction. Bella Maree Lane is an Australian-born heart wound healer who now lives in Southern California. Her unique skills offer her clients support in the areas of emotional freedom, relationship healing, and conscious intimacy. Over the last 2 decades, Bella has traveled with Globe, exploring her passion for spiritual and personal development. Her healing quest led her to many exotic and some not so exotic locations. Find out which ones are. She spent many months in India ashrams, studying meditation, primal painting, family constellation, and Tantra. Bella, I'm so excited to have you here, and I can't wait to hear what you have prepared for us today, love. Come on out. How are you, darling? Can we hear Bella?
Can you hear me, Rhonda?
Yay, I can hear you, darling. Yes. Woo!
Energy. I mean, this is so amazing. You're giving me chills. And as I'm like, oh my God, I'm making notes myself. So thank you for such an incredibly inspirational launch into today. And I know our day is intuition. And I wanted to start out by asking everybody to slow down and take a couple of nice deep breaths, because this has been one of my biggest intuitive lessons, is to actually remember to slow down and breathe. And I'm sorry, I'm sure everyone is super excited after Rhonda's amazing intro. I just want everyone to ground, because intuition is actually something that happens without the need for conscious reasoning. And I felt it was important to frame that, because a lot of people wonder what intuition is, whether we trust this, whether we follow this. And to that point, I do want to share a story or two with you guys. And it's simply to illustrate the point all around intuition and the times that I did not follow my intuition that did not end well. So it's a little humiliating, quite humbling. And to look at me, you probably wouldn't guess that I've been through a lot in my life. And today I do want to preface this with, I am so happy about every single last thing that ever happened in my life. And sometimes when people hear my story, they look at me and they just feel as though this doesn't match the way she looks, because I've learned to kind of, like Rhonda did, I've learned to make myself work in this world. I've learned to do the things I've learned to do. But one of the stories that I do want to share that I think is really relevant is I found myself living in Paris. I'd been in this relationship and it wasn't going in the way that I knew that I really needed. So I decided to go and live there, make a new life. And it was difficult because I did not speak French. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I just knew somewhere deep inside that it would all work out. And in case you hadn't noticed, I have an Australian accent. So I was born in Australia. I was living in Paris, and there's a knock on the door. And there is the person that I'd been dating for a couple of years, standing larger than life on my doorstep. And so it's kind of super romantic and at the same time a little bit daunting, because I really was in the process of reinventing myself and taking responsibility and going in a different direction. Fast forward. And this all sounds very glamorous, so don't get carried away about the story. But he closes the Eiffel Tower and he makes this big proposal to me, and I'm not denigrating what he did. The point is not that. The point is, it was all very romantic and it had this certain element of, oh my God, everything a girl could have ever wished for. I have to be honest, at that moment in time where he proposed, I literally wanted to throw myself off the second level of the Eiffel Tower, because I knew inside that this was going to be a disaster. And I completely ignored my intuition, because and this is the point that I want to make about intuition. I got this this incredible feeling through my entire body that all of this was amazing. And there was no part of me that didn't appreciate the effort and everything else that had gone into this. I just knew at a very deep level inside, no, 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 this is not going to work out well. And I ignored that. And the reason I ignored that, and I really would love everybody here who's been through heartbreak to put something in the chat, right? Who hasn't been through heartbreak? I didn't want the consequences. I was afraid that if I spoke my truth, that it would be misunderstood, that I would be vilified as this terrible person. So it's not about that. It's really about a lot of times what I've discovered is when I haven't and clients haven't followed their intuition, a lot of times it's because we're afraid of the repercussions of what that would mean. Someone will not like us anymore. They won't hold us in the same esteem. They might get angry. They may leave. They may threaten us. I mean, there's all kinds of consequences to what happens when we follow our intuition. And it's in that moment, I didn't want to hurt anybody. I had no idea this proposal was going to happen. I couldn't have possibly formulated any idea. I just knew in my entire body that this wasn't going to work out. So fast forward, I came back to the United States. I gave up my life in Paris and I married this person. And I found myself 3.5 years later, I'm just going through the whole thing, literally on the floor of my bedroom, huddled in a ball, sobbing my heart out because he'd said, he wanted a divorce. He'd sold his company, made a whole lot of money. He didn't need me anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And, as much as I was devastated, terrified, and literally heartbroken, there was a voice inside that came to me that said, I'm done. And it was almost like I was looking around to see who said that. But there was in the midst of all this like turmoil and distress and panic, there was this really strong feeling that said, I'm done. I'm done with playing victim. I'm done with not following my intuition. I'm just done. And so within a week, I had packed my bags and left for India. And the rest of the story can all unfold. And the story is not about me at all. It really is, I'm hoping to open a conversation around, the journey that we all take is to help us like a flower. Each petal unfolds in its own time. And every single experience that we have is here to help us grow and here to help us move to the newest iteration of who we are. And there's also a part of me that says, I wonder what would have happened had my young self listened to my intuitive voice and said, I love the proposal. I love that you came. I'm so honored. I adore you. And this is just not my truth. Sometimes I can't help but wonder what that life would have ended up being like. And I realized that it's not even it is really my biggest lesson in life that repeats and repeats and repeats is my issue around boundaries, around feeling that I have a right to say, you know what, this doesn't feel okay for me, lovingly, respectfully. And Rhonda knows this about me. I was a victim of incest as a child. So when you start out at such a young age, feeling as though it's somehow your fault, you tend to take an over responsibility for almost everything. And that's a little bit of a shadow that follows you through. So I want to ask everybody what they've done in their life to really integrate the experiences that they've had that may have pushed them into a state of maybe shame and shock and a little bit of deer in the headlights, that we feel our intuitive voice, we hear it, and yet there's a part of us that is just too afraid to follow. And I want everyone to know that I'm not saying this from a judgmental state at all, because up until 2 days ago, I'm still doing this. I'm still learning this lesson. But I would love Rhonda to give me some feedback, some questions.
Well, I love, yeah, Bella, I love the story because I think it really is so, it's so poignant because I know every single one of us have felt that calling or that like voice that we just ignored. I mean, there's so many times and we shouldn't be regretting the decisions we make. And this is, I believe too, where the courage comes from, right? Like having the courage to say, this isn't okay for me. And, you know, being a woman that has a 14-year-old daughter, I want her to learn this early, to be able to have her own boundaries, say, you know what, this doesn't feel okay. And the moment that you were in that spot, you could have said, this doesn't feel okay for me. And it makes me always wonder why do you think you said yes? What do you think that was that made you say yes instead of listening?
Number one, I was a little bit in shock. And I consider myself, even back then, highly intuitive. This really was a surprise, and you orchestrated this really well. So I think it's a little bit of shock, which caused me to see. But more so than that, I felt I'd been engaged a couple of times and I hadn't gotten married because I hadn't met my person. And I felt this enormous pressure that I was supposed to get married and supposed to do all these things. And here's this wildly successful, handsome, charismatic, gorgeous man proposing to me, and everything in my body was saying no. Not no to him. It was really just, it's a no for me as a being and as knowing what's right for me. And I think I became too afraid of his anger, of his response, of what everyone would think of me.
Well,
and
I think too, Bella, this happens, right? Like how often and this is what we're talking about, right? How we've been programmed to be the girl that does what everyone accepts, right? And this is not what it's about. This is not what our wilding is about. But now, Bella, what I love that what you're doing is that you're now really guiding and helping women, and you're working not only in the spiritual space, but coaching in your space in Tantra, helping them really open up to who they are so they can say no. Talk a little bit about what you do before we switch on over in like a minute or so to have Kathy come, and then we're going to take some questions for all of you.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Yes, I've blended heart wound healing, which is all the learning love, therapeutic style of dealing with things that have happened to us in the past, because I do think there's a place for that. And then the tantric aspect, which is learning to live absolutely fully present in every moment. And that sounds so easy, but actually as a practice, it's so beautiful. You can walk on the beach and have the sand make love to your feet. You can learn to have the universe in its entirety making love with your being every moment of every day. And it does sound a little Pollyanna-ish, but with practice, that's entirely and absolutely doable. And the most important thing is that you are willing to ruin a moment by being your authentic self, that you're willing to really show up and say, this is just not my truth. And that we have the strength and we have the internal structures to deal with the fallout from that, because I think that's what a lot of us avoid. It's not so much that we don't know our intuition, it's all of what will happen as a result.
I agree with you. In fact, I think too, Bella, we're going to have some questions on this, because this is what we're cracking today, ladies, is like knowing those moments when you haven't been bold or you didn't listen to yourself. And this is the power that we can take. And I love the work that you do, Bella, because it's really showing people how to just love and accept into themselves. And remember, there's going to be some polarizing things that might be very triggering today, but that's okay. Open up and ask yourself why, because there's a lot of programming that's been happening to us for all of our lives. And now it's time to really open up so we can let our wildness come through. Bella, thank you so much. I absolutely love you.
This past year, as we found ourselves closed off from the world and from each other, a book was being written by a small group of wild women. That book inspired the manifesto that gave birth to a movement. Imagine an emotionally charged letter of gratitude from one struggling anonymous woman to another anonymous woman who'd mentored her and awakened the wildness within her without even realizing it. One wild woman awakening another wild woman, inspiring her to believe when she'd almost given up, to let loose her wildness and step into her true power. Being a wild woman means to lead fearless, to love fearless, to live fearless, to be kind, thoughtful, driven, and balanced, to embrace honest wealth, to trust our intuition, to develop true leadership, and to welcome diversity. We are women gone wild. Come be wild with us.